part of $2 Radio, which is a new platform we started, which is audiovisual additions to our books. This conversation is a little different because instead of having someone read, we're just having a conversation kind of about what's going on right now for artists and art administrators during COVID. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I said earlier too, I saw a couple familiar names for people that were here for our first event. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for this rescheduled time. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers tonight, or our panelists rather. So first we have Andre Perry. He is an essayist and arts advocate. He received his MFA from the University of Iowa's Nonfiction writing program, and his work has appeared in The Believer, Catapult, Granta, and other journals. He co-founded Iowa City's Mission Creek Festival, a celebration of music and literature, as well as the multidisciplinary festival of creative process, Witching Hour. He continues to live and work in Iowa City. His first book, Some of Us Are Very Hungry Now, was published by $2 Radio in 2019. So, hi Andre, thank you for being here. And then we also have Sadie Dupuis. She's the guitarist, songwriter, and singer of rock band Speedy Ortiz, as well as the producer and multi-instrumentalist behind pop project Sad 13. Sadie heads the record label Wax 9, which recently launched a weekly poetry journal, and holds an MFA in poetry from UMass Amherst, where she also taught writing. Mouthguard, her first book, was published in 2018 by Black Ocean. Thank you, Sadie, for being here as well.
Thanks for the intro.
Yeah. And last but not least, we have Phil Kim. Phil is the Marketing and Communications Director for Ohio Citizens for the Arts, a statewide grassroots arts advocacy organization. A longtime resident of Columbus, Ohio, he's been an active organizer of arts and creative events, and is a member of the bands Connections and Long Odds. He serves as the board of directors for Matter News, WAV, We Amplify Voices, and served on the 934 Gallery Advisory Board. Phil is a commissioner of the Create Columbus Commission. He graduated with degrees in comparative studies and English from The Ohio State University. Hi, Phil. Thank you for being here as well.
Hey.
And you don't see their faces on the call, but we do have 2 indie bookstores that we're featuring tonight. The first is Prairie Lights in Iowa City, where Andre resides. They are just like a nationally recognized bookstore, and we really encourage people to support them at this time. And our second indie bookstore is People's Books and Culture. Formerly it was the Penn Book Center, that's in Philadelphia, where Sadie is. And they are also an independent bookstore. Something really cool about them is that the community really rallies around that bookstore. They've been in danger of closing twice, but because they have such strong ties in the community's been able to keep them open. So those are 2 community-driven bookstores that if anyone on this call hears someone talking about a book and they think they want to read it, please consider purchasing that book from Prairie Lights or People's Books and Culture. Cool. All right, and that's about it for me. I'm going to hand it off to Phil now, who's going to moderate. Like I said earlier, we do have a Q&A feature for those of you watching. So if you want to put questions in as people are talking, you can go ahead and do that. But we won't be answering questions that are submitted in the Q&A until the end of the conversation. So cool. All right. That's
awesome. Thanks, Molly.
I'll join you guys later.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Trying to see if it's easier with one or both in. Anyway, how's it going, guys? It's good to see you. So the format is kind of, we have a few general questions and then maybe a couple specific questions for each of you towards the end. I'll the question and briefly give my answer to it, and then we can kind of open it up. Whoever wants to respond first, go right ahead. So pretty off the bat, easy question is, what kinds of things were we working on before this crisis really emerged? And then, you know, in retrospect, how did the crisis kind of affect those projects? So for me, in my day-to-day work, I'm working at an advocacy organization, and our group is basically, we work with the legislature, the elected officials all around the state of Ohio to kind of lobby and leverage our voice to increase funding for the arts in general, but specifically for the Ohio Arts Council, which is our state arts agency. They get money from the state government, then they distribute that money out through grants to organizations and artists, and they're kind of funded, I guess, by the state, who determines how much money they through the budget. So our job is really to advocate on behalf of arts and culture and get as much money for the Arts Council as possible. So that happens every 2 years, a budget. So we just, in the last year, 2018 had a budget year, and we did get some increase in funding. So this is kind of what we call an off year, but really there is no off year because we have to be advocating all. So really it was kind of a new laying of groundwork for the next year, the next budget cycle, and the future. And we also had a new executive director get hired, so that's my boss. And so this whole kind of since November to about March, when things really started happening, was all about laying groundwork and building and kind of attending a lot of conferences, national conferences, state conferences, and building kind of a new groundwork for our organization to advocate and be effective. So obviously, kind of aligns really well in some ways to what we're doing now post-crisis, and in fact, kind of the need for a statewide voice for the arts is even more important. And later, I know Sadie's been involved in a lot of advocacy work now, talking to your representatives. I just saw that letter you wrote, I think. But basically, we can talk about some of that work. You can talk about it later. But, right now, the importance of and talking to your elected officials about funding for the arts is like super crucial. So my work has actually gotten a lot more deeper and just kind of expedited all the groundwork we were trying to lay. It's like now just happening off the cuff. So that's kind of where I was in terms of work. And in the personal like band stuff, we were recording an album, and so that all is kind of at a standstill, all the planning of the release shows, so that's kind of the other side of my stuff that's been I've been facing. So if you guys want to go ahead, and I don't know if Sadie wants to, whoever wants to start. Yeah,
I will start because Andre is muted, so I think that's me. I have to thank this crisis for being very considerate of my schedule. A lot of the outdoor world work that I had to do, I had kind of just tapped on prior to March. I've been working on a new record since about June of last year that I'd kind of just finished everything I needed to do in person for. I think my last outdoor world activity was taking press photos on March 2nd. I had been working on a new poetry book. I'd finished up a second manuscript, so I'm kind of thankful that I'd already written just about the full book before stay at home, because I feel like we're going to be really weary of quarantine inspired art, which you got to write as a product of your time. But I'm thankful I did something before this, because who knows, continue. And then beyond, Phil, you and I met, I don't know, maybe 8, and I've been on tour just about that whole time. I just had 2 months off of tour, which is really unusual for me. This is by far the longest I've slept in my own bed, even since I was divorced parents. I've never slept in my own bed as in a row as I have the past 2 months. But I'm really lucky. I had a couple of random gigs in January and February that paid well, and I wasn't counting on. I was really going to start touring again in Marshall, AWP and South by Southwest, kind of early on, in a way that my friends were like, what are you doing? Why don't you watch it and see? But obviously, see how that has turned out. So yeah, that's kind of what I was up to before this, getting an album ready, working on a book. Some of the advocacy projects you're talking about, I started No Music for Ice in the fall, which is a group of, it started as an open letter that 1,000 musicians signed pledging not to work with Amazon while they have contracts that basically power ICE's infrastructure for deportations. And some of the people involved with that have kind of become involved in a musicians union called the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers that launched the second letter that you were just alluding to. And that came out a few weeks ago. So yeah, since I've been home, I don't know if that's a question we're up to yet, but some of the projects from beforehand have continued and some have had to shift. And I think I'm just figuring out every day what will be what. And that's how it is. Andre,
Yep.
what have you been up to?
I can jump in. Yeah, I was pretty much firing on all cylinders before we went to shutdown mode. In the writing world, I was just out promoting my book from last fall. And so I think I was entering the third or fourth wave of tour. And so starting to kind of get out of the bookstore realm and starting to do festivals and conference, things like that. And I was like really tired, but I was also just like so excited because just like you're kind of over that initial nervousness or anxiety and you're just out just engaging communities, meeting amazing people who are running bookstores or running festivals or conferences, doing other art, and just, I don't know, like the most deeply like spiritual side of that whole journey. And so I was in the midst of that. So I'm both, so happy that I got to do some of it, but then, a little bit sad that I didn't get to do the rest of it, but it is what it is. And then in my other world, we were also just so busy. So I work at a historic theater, which is an arts organization. We have tons of shows. We were gearing up for a festival. Our big spring festival, Mission Creek, is all music and literature. So it's like all of the things that like I love in this world, happening at once. And it's all like independent artists and independent voices and just another form of community. But obviously all that changed. I think like it all like crashed at the same time because I was going to go to AWP with like actually kind of like going as a writer, but also going for work for Mission Creek. Excited to engage with community, and it was going to be a few weeks before the festival, and like none of that happened. So canceled AWP and then canceled the festival week, and like that was kind of the beginning of everything's going dark, which is obviously had a lot of really difficult ramifications for a lot of Americans from the health standpoint as well as the economic. So I think like this time period, if I were to case it in like one succinct thought, it's like been like a nice time to return to like understanding or re-examining our values. Or maybe I'll speak for myself. It's been a good time to go back and understand my values just as a citizen and as an artist, and also as someone who works for an arts organization and a community.
No, I like that. I'll co-sign that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a very interesting time for me because I'm at home all day and I'm privileged enough to I own a house and like I can get groceries and all that, and I do wonder like what is worth of my work right now, and it's hard to it kind of goes to a later question just in terms of like this push for productivity during self-isolation. It's like you have all the time in the world, you're at home, how much are you doing to satisfy yourself to be productive, and those kinds of questions are just refiguring what you value and what your work is valued as and how you value your work. Those are interesting questions. If you have anything you want to say about that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know that for some people there feels like a compulsion to be productive. I think for me it's compulsion in the very mental health sense of the term, in that I have OCD and ADD, and if I was not taking on a lot of projects right now, I would be, not that I'm not taking side really hard, but I think Often when I see something that upsets me, my immediate impulse is, what can I do to help in any way? So I think I read this interview in Tape Op, and I'm forgetting the name of this really awesome woman who teaches she teaches like classes for girls in Ableton. She does a lot of like cool stuff like that. And she talks about how her career really changed when she started working more in service of other people rather than make it about like her project. So I think a lot of I'm doing the same thing everyone is, like it's hard to sometimes believe in art, even though it's what we've all really given our lives to, especially when it has no bearing on what's happening outside. But looking at art that I can make or help further and see what it can support that does have real world implications. So there've been a few like fundraising projects that I've done in the middle of all this. We were sitting on a Speedy Ortiz live album from we never put out for some reason. Actually, also on a fundraising tour that I think we went to on. It was like a Girls Rock Camp Foundation fundraising tour that for whatever reason we thought was a good idea to not pay ourselves for.
It's awesome.
But we made this live album, never put it out. And I don't know if you've seen, I'm sure you've seen Bandcamp's doing these great days where they waive all their revenue share. So we put the album up for just, and whatever we earned, we were going to give to National Bailout. We thought maybe we'd get $1,000. We got a little over 3,000 from projects like that, compilations. Specifically, really important cause to me is prison abolition. So anything that's funneling money to bail people out is, if downloading MP3s that already exist can help to that. That's a big focus for me. And then the other thing I've really been working on is I started sort of connected to the Bandcamp thing, a journal through my record label that pays poets, because I just don't know a single writer. I mean, I know a couple writers, but mostly everyone I know is either getting laid off or their day job source of income is happening right now. So after one of these first Bandcamp days, I put up an album I made in 2011 that cost me $0 to make, just up for the weekend. It made a bunch of money, and using that to start a journal that pays poets each week. So
awesome.
Just projects like that can help people with either something as small as a couple extra groceries or something as big as hopefully bailing people out of prison. So that's sort of been my very long-winded answer about the fact that I have OCD and ADD, and you just heard all of it.
No, that's great.
And trying to do projects that help other people.
Yeah, I feel similar in a lot of ways. I have to stay on project and stay focused, and so I'm just nah, I'm gonna keep making or supporting whatever it might be. At work with the theater, it's been tough because we have shows and there are obviously no shows, and there's a real effect to that just in terms of survival and sustainability, which is challenging. And then at the same time, you feel I'm grateful that I still have a job to wake up to, and I can be home a lot, or that I can still do stuff. So I just need to not be sad about it, just do what I can in that space. And so I think all of us at work are thinking about, okay, we can't do all these shows with all these touring artists or some local artists. So how do we still support artists, and how do we really feed our community or serve our community to bring joy in different ways during this time when we don't have our stages or we can't do it through the traditional method? So just to be straight up, so we applied for the SBA PPP loan, and we were very lucky to receive that. And so our organization who's full-time for a couple months, and so we're using that time to rethink what we look like phase, which in terms of traditional events and gatherings could be till this time next year or beyond. A plan, how do we not only survive but be a robust arts organization and provide just spiritual outlet for all the people who live in this area, to the best of our ability. So that we're hustling hard on that right now. We might do some things well, we might make some mistakes, but that's crap.
That's great. I mean, from my work, which is we're doing a lot of just talking to artists and arts organizations, seeing what the challenges they're facing are and like what their needs are, you know, aside from assistance, which is the main thing that's being hurt by the arts community, because like you said, there's no shows going. I was just thinking last week, just thinking about every show that is just not happening that would be happening, you know, just in, it's hard to even conceive of when I think of going, like living in a city like Columbus where there's a lot of music and art, and any weekend I'm trying to think of, there's 15 different things I could go to, and those are all not happening. So that's crazy. And I think it's an interesting time for the arts, because a lot of what's happening is we're seeing that this is a systemic change, like things have to operate differently from here on out. And a lot of what I'm seeing is this collaboration that was kind of already in the works. I saw hosting bands, you know, bands hosting poets to open for this mixing of genres, and collaboration has already started, kind of intensifying even before the crisis. And I think now it's even more emphasized, and it's going to be important to do that. And on the other end, I think for me also as an arts advocacy working with the government, it's kind of, we have traditionally been focused on the grass tops, not the grassroots, right? The influencers, the people in power who know the people in power. And I think now you're seeing all the community rallying behind each other. You're seeing a lot more grassroots activity. You're seeing individuals just, you know, feeling desperate or like wanting to help, having the privilege and ability to and time to help. So now you're seeing a lot more of that. So that's an encouraging side to me, and I think it'll be really important to have conversations like this where you have a theater director, you have a band author, you know, an artist, you have an arts advocate person like myself, all talking together and, yeah, just going over what's the future look like, and et cetera. So appreciate those comments. Let's see. Next question is kind of to the point of being at home and what you've been experiencing and working on. And you guys mentioned it earlier that touring was a big part of your life, obviously, and that experience of performing and connecting to a large group of people has not been happening. And I wonder, like, are there ways that you are able to supplement that loss? Like, are there things you're doing that help you or make up for not being able to do that? Or is that so? And even in the future, because we're not going to see large gatherings like that for the next few months at least, like, is just wondering how you're dealing and managing with that loss, I guess.
Andre, you start. I fielded the last couple first.
All right, I'll jump. I'm like, yes, I would love to be out and doing like book events, of course, but I think I really miss being able to go to our local bookstore, which is Prairie Lights that Molly talked about earlier. And I think I would miss that whatever town I lived in, because like that's a place where I spend the limited disposable income that I have, but it's also like a spot where I just like connect with so many different folks from around town, catch up with people who I'm maybe not talking to on a daily basis necessarily, get turned on to new books, get turned on to new art, like hear about shows that are happening. I'm like getting older, so I like hear about like the cool DIY show that happened like in the basement, and I can at least like live vicariously through the youth. So like that's like a really important part of my life, and it like obviously like I love going to like the clubs as well, and I really you know, about the loss of like small clubs. And I know this isn't like I'm like bringing up anything new, but I worry about like the 150 in our town where like local bands can play, where like amazing touring bands can play, where there can be like the rock and roll poetry night and like all these other outlets for just like community gathering. Because like that's like essential. Like that's like part of the cultural blood life, I think, of any town, whether it's a college town or a bigger or like a really huge metropolis, you know. You, I feel like we need those spots to express.
Are you thinking of as Gabe's? What, one of the ones you mean?
I love Gabe's. There are two in Iowa City. There are Gabe's, and then there's the Mill, which
Yeah.
are so dear to my heart, both of them, and they just like bring like different vibes, and just like even have it like there's a Gabe show and there's the right time for a Mill show. It can even be the same band, you know, like it's just like this is your Gabe's night, like let's do it like that, or I need to sit down tonight, so like it's the Mill night. But yeah, I'm talking about those spots, places like that, or like a Johnny Brenda's or something, you know, in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, Actor is very similar to Andre's. I think on tour, sometimes there's a real, it's not so personal sometimes playing a show. Like I'll play and then I'll go sit at merch I like to sit at merch so I can meet people. But, I'm sort of naturally not a super outgoing person, and I think sometimes on tour I have to kind of put it on, and it feels I don't know how to explain it. Like, you know, you connect with people at the merch table, and it's not a fake connection, work networking mode. That's kind of, it can be exhausting. And I come home from tour and don't really want to see anyone or go out at all. I'm not a big nightlife person when I'm not doing it for that's a byproduct of my work, or just the fact that I am you know, I like to stay home and read, and somehow wound up in a rock band. But the things that I'm really, really missing are just being able to go into a small store, like a bookstore. And I've been doing some ordering from small businesses. Like I definitely have some orders from PBC month or two. I have some orders from Joseph Fox, another local bookstore I like a lot. Been ordering from all record labels that I like. But yeah, I worry about the future of all of these small places that are really the things that are like my cheer up when I am coming home from a tour exhausted and want to feel grounded in a city that I live in. And I have lived in Philly for a little over 4 years now. It's like the longest I've ever lived in one apartment as an adult. And even as I said, like my parents split up when I was really young. I never slept in one bed for this long. So I lived in Boston before this. I have a big connection there, and we just lost our Gabe's or Johnny Brenda's, which is Great Scott. And it's been great to see people from writing world, people from, you know, visual art world, people from band world, all doing fundraisers to support the staffs of these venues, because that's certainly as crucial as, you know, holding on to a lease. But it's going to be really strange to see what kinds of networks for exhibiting our work exist, or exhibiting our work and connecting with other people, whether that is our bookstores or our venues or local restaurants. And again, hard to know how have been shut down.
Yep. It is an interesting thing thinking about just, again, this problem's bigger than just even local, city, regional, state. It goes internet, you know, it's a global pandemic. So if you look, what we're looking at in my organization is like, what are other countries doing who are starting to reopen? What are other countries doing in terms of artists' relief? And you can see Germany has set aside a few $1 billion for their arts and culture sector. I don't know exactly how that money's dispersed, but they are, you know, their government has made it a arts and culture is important to our national heritage, or get a little tricky, but France has done the same. They've set aside, you know, a large amount of money for specifically the arts and culture sector. I think Canada has done similar. And that's all to say that, you know, it is going to be, even when I'm working at the state level, you know, Ohio is looking to the federal government because there's just not enough money to go around for everybody. And so it's interesting in the sense of like, it is going to take grassroots advocacy and like voting, and it's changing the game, the political nature as well. Is if you care about the arts, you're gonna be engaged, but even more so now, it's like, even if you don't necessarily think you care about the arts are gonna impact your entire world. So we all need to get together behind it. So all really, I mean, thing is, what I do a lot of the time is collect news. We have a running list of press related to the arts and culture in Ohio on our website. And I would say like 80% of it is really, and it's not the greatest news. That 20% that is the community rally behind a venue that's closing, or artists doing special fundraisers or creating something new, innovating, that's like it's my little some push for everyone to get involved in work and arts advocacy, whatever. Just go out there, support your artists. Okay, next question is kind of switching gears. Just kind of, what's your daily routine look? How are you balancing work and self-care, and maybe how is it similar or different, or how things have changed since the stay-at-home order, I guess?
Yeah, it took a minute to get into a rhythm, obviously, because everything was so different, and just like being in so much just Zoom world and different call methods and all, like just like have like my phone for one meeting, my laptop for another meeting, like someone and somewhere else, and then like internet dying on all of them. So after getting past those small hurdles, I'm definitely into rhythm. I'm probably working more than I think my partner would want me to be working. We have like so I work at this place called the Englert Theater, and actually come into the office, and we're each on a different floor, which is like hilarious. And we're mostly here, so we don't really see each other that much. But it's actually good for me to get out of the house and come and just like isolate in my office alone for several hours and get stuff done. We're about to have a kid, so I'm just up like from like a strategic and like a vision level, you know, with my team, and then I'm just gonna be like, peace, and I'm gonna like leave for a little while. I'm gonna come back, and I'm just gonna be really excited to see all the amazing creative work they've done to push our mission forward. And yeah, I'm like the writing stuff like never stops. I'm always like taking notes and reading and thinking, and I'm like hacking out ideas. So whether the world is beautiful or terrible or both at the same time, as it often is, I'm like always doing that stuff.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, congrats before anything
awesome.
else.
It's exciting.
Yeah. My partner, I think as well, would like me to be working less than I am. It's really hard. I'm so like Stockholm syndromed with touring that any amount of at home is just not going to look normal no matter what I do. And I think again that sort of explains some of the overworking that and taking on a lot of disparate projects in this time. But I'm trying to carve out some space for things that aren't just, you know, sitting on the computer or on the phone or doing things to, you know, set up other projects for one thing, because I'm developing horrifying tendonitis and my vision is getting worse from all this screen time. So what am I doing? I've been going running, which is not a new hobby for me, but it's really the only thing I've done outside of the house in the past 2.5 months. Becoming an interesting challenge too, because I wear the mask the entire time. And as it starts to hit 80 in Philly, it's a really interesting challenge to try to breathe with thick quilted pieces of cloth over your face. But trying to find any way to just do a physical thing 4 times a week, I think has been really important, especially because I'm here with my partner in my pretty small apartment. And I think we're both musicians and really used to being on tour and having space, and we'd be losing our minds maybe if I didn't go out a couple times a week. So that's one thing. Yeah, just trying to find, where they can exist. One thing I've been doing since right around when this started is I started getting a tarot reading once a month, which is just kind of a fun way to mark the time. I know that it's May because I had a tarot reading a few days ago. And once a weekend, I make a really elaborate brunch. The only things that cheer me up are going to spend money at small local businesses. And I'm a vegan. Philly's kind of moved to Philly because we have really great vegan restaurants, and can't go to them. So I've been cooking like 2 hours long elaborate brunches once a weekend, and that's how I know it's the weekend. So those are my self-care activities.
Can I actually ask a question?
Oh.
So since you've kind of been forced to be off the road and be out of one of the typical cycles of being a musician, I spend a lot of my day talking to agents and talking to other people running venues or arts orgs, and we're like, how do we change how we do our stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything your perspective as both a songwriter, performer, and a writer? Would you change anything about the way things work, or are you I want to go back to record album, tour album, come home for a couple of weeks, work on new material, being in that cycle, or do you see this as an opportunity to be wait a second, let's do it, just get back to whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason that the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers has kind of started. And right now there are only around 30 people on the sort of steering committee, which is behind the scenes, although we had about 1,000 people express interest in becoming members, and we're sort of figuring out what next steps. Those 30 people are all organized into a number of subcommittees. So our first big public action that Phil brought up was this open letter to Congress, as well as we set up a call hotline where I am unfortunately the voice of the call hotline. And I say unfortunately because I cannot stand my speaking voice, but it seemed fun to be Mr. Phone. So and the idea of that is it's forwarding people's calls to Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, members of the Congressional Arts Caucus, asking for a number of asks that are part of our initial open letter: rent moratorium, extension of unemployment benefits to the end of the year, Medicare for all, USPS funding, all the things that really impact. But behind, we don't want it to just be call your government organization. What kind of union would that really be specifically? As Phil mentioned, at the federal level, there's not a tremendous amount of interaction between artists at our level and those budgets. So we have a streaming subcommittee. We have hoping to negotiate for fair payment, since really none of us see much income from that. Labels relationship subcommittee, which is going to advocate for better financial transparency between not only when labels do their payouts, but what should a deal look like, and what should people be advocating for when they first get roped into sign. New relations is another subcommittee that I'm on, and have kind of done some amount of work over the past 5 years with trying to get venues to adopt safer spaces policies, but there's so much that could be done with us in communication with each other. And I think a lot in good faith, because as we said, we don't know that these small 100, 200, 300 cap clubs will be there on the other side. But I think we really need fair and mutually supportive as possible for the eventual reopening if it comes in 2 years. So yeah, I think that for a lot of us, envisioning a better way where we don't make 95% of our income playing shows and selling records at those shows and sleeping in beds that aren't our own for 10 months of the year, that would be an amazing future. And obviously there's no, great outcome of a pandemic that is killing people every day, but if it allows us to pause it and reorganize some of the things that are really broken in the music industry, at least that's, something to work towards. And I muted myself. That's like the mic drop.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I mean, that was a great answer. I think one thing that, the people that I'm working with, and yes, I mean, everyone agrees that this is very challenging and not very good time for many or a lot of folks. And so it's I guess weird for me to say like there's positives or let's look at the positives. It's not really that. It's more, let's use this moment where things are completely new and different to establish foundations so that there's more equity, that there's more workers' rights. There's an opportunity now to fight for that on a different level than there was before. And I think the people in power don't really know what to do, so they're looking to the experts. They're looking to people like you guys to give them recommendations, to give them best practices, because they really don't know. And so that was a great segue to this question that I was going to ask. Some good answers, and I wonder for Andre, like as you're thinking about reopening a theater, and even for Sadie, it's just like, what as an artist, what would make you feel comfortable enough to even play a show at a venue, right? Like, what are those protocols that should be in place to even make you be comfortable enough to play a show? And then for Andre, it's like, what kinds of things can you do to bring the audience back who are wary? Because the big thing I miss is going to those 100, 200 capacity venues and watching a show with my best friends playing on the stage. And I don't feel like in the next few months I'm going to be comfortable doing that, but there might be things or like, how are we going to at least enact policies that or protocols maybe that will make people feel more comfortable? I don't know. That's just the question, is like, what things are going to give artists and audiences and people who run those venues getting them more comfortable to come back and do those things, aside from a vaccine, I guess. And even then, so I don't know if you have any insight, Andre, on your end of the theater running part of it.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, and I'm in 1 million Zoom meetings with venue operators, arts organizations, promoters, just talking about like, what's the open up strategy, and like, how far away do you have to have people, and like, what's the hand sanitization, and what do you do if someone refuses to wear a mask, and checking temperatures and all this. And I like understand that, and I'm feeling it, and I understand how there's some institutions that might need to open up or are already open, like hospitals or buildings or things like that, where you just need to like have health protocols in place because people are going to be coming in. But from the venue side, in terms of throwing a show or doing a reading with 55 people in a small room, my current state of mind is that whenever artists feel excited to be there and aren't stressed out, whenever the staff working it just like feels good and they're not like second guessing everything they're doing, and whenever just us as like people who go to enjoy things, we can go and not be like half anxious and half trying to enjoy it. I think once we get to that moment where we're like able to lose ourselves again in the art that's happening before us, around us, that's like when it's time to get back or get into the new version of in live events. That present like, you know, delaying that might take a while to get there. You know, that could be like literally like this time next year or beyond, which seems almost impossible to like imagine. But like, I think that's like a hopefully it's better than that, right? But like, I think that is one possible outcome. So that's a lot to ask of people who live in this world, who perform in this world, work at the venues, who run the bookstore. It's like a lot to be like, you can't do your thing for that long, just from a sustainability standpoint. So I don't know what the solution is to that problem, but I think we all have to feel good about doing the thing. And it's going to be more than just like hand sanitizer and masks.
Yep.
Those are just my opinions. Sorry.
All opinions here, no worries.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's harder for me to answer as someone who is not on the venue side of things, and as someone who has no background or expertise in public health. I'm certainly just going to be waiting on best practice guidelines as they come in and presumably change over the course of the next several years. One thing that's certainly on my mind is that, like, look at, for example, like $2 Radio headquarters opening by appointment. They can have maybe a couple people in the store at a time. I can't remember what their exact guidelines are, but it seems like that's a way to reopen a business that's safe. I think for concerts, we just don't know yet. And I think another thing, you know, if we are trying to keep distancing guidelines, which I think we need to be, that means that like Weezer is going to be playing at, you know, Johnny Brandon's with like a smaller cap. I really think that the kinds of venues that I would normally be looking to book on a tour in the, you know, 200 to 1,000 cap range, depending on the city, are not going to be open to bands that draw 200 to 1,000. They're going to be open to bands that draw 100,000 and can charge a higher ticket price because that venue is open for the near future. So I think those of us in sort of the smaller to middle range are going to be looking at very different forms of performance. I look at I remember I went to see Mira play at a house a couple years ago, and she was doing a thing where it was like you could sell 15 tickets to the house, and it was a slightly higher price, and, you know, 15 people got this sort of private show. I think David Bazan has done stuff like that. That might be sort of the way back in for those of us in this middle range zone. And certainly, you know, Phil, again, as you know, I think we met at a show at a bookstore. Like, I love to play weird, different alternative spaces. So it's going to be work for those of us who are used to doing, you know, the mid-range clubs. And I feel excited about that when it's time to, but again, I don't have the public health background to know when that is or what would make things safe. And sometimes even like living in this, it's hard to know that the recommendations we get are really the correct ones. So eyeing things cautiously. And I think that's why so many of us have kind of pivoted to doing the live stream stuff. I think a lot of people are doing it unpaid, which I'm not really interested in at this point because I hate playing solo. So I need to either be making some money or earning some money for something I really care about to do even in person. But just looking at other ways that we can sort of connect with people. I think I've been trying to use, apart from the other projects I talked about, using some of this time home to get better at I did a scoring thing for Never Again Action that was kind of a cool, I'd never done like an instrumental track for a PSA before. So just trying to find other ways to connect with people through art that don't just involve a bunch of bodies in a room. As much as love a show with a lot of bodies in a room, that's not, we may not be there for a few years.
Awesome. Okay, so we are getting close to an hour. I have a lot of other questions. Maybe we can do another chat sometime in the future. But last question, I guess, going back to just kind of I'm interested in this, and going back to kind of self-care, I wonder what art things you guys are inspired by lately, what's helping you get through right now, something that you would recommend to, anyone who's watching. The easy one for me is I just finished watching The Last Dance, which is the Chicago Bulls documentary. Hanif Abdurraqib did a talk with Clark Kellogg, who was an Ohio State basketball player and announcer now, a legend in Columbus. And they did a talk about The Last Dance through the Wexner Center for the Arts. So again, it was this colliding of all sorts of worlds. Hanif put out a book with $2. So it's really cool to see that kind of stuff happening. And yeah, last question is just like, what should I be listening to or watching or reading? Like, I'm here for your recommendations.
Oh boy. Yeah, if you're
I'm sure there's a lot.
I mean, I hate fun, so it's hard for me to recommend fun. What I mean, these Bandcamp revenue wave days are really awesome because I think 15% is normally there. I should know this. Why don't I know? I think they normally take a 15% cut on everything that's processed through the site. It's already a better deal than you're getting through any other sales or streaming service. But to be able to take 100% of your sales is pretty monumental. So I've been using those days. I have never been a big MP3 digital music listener. So I've been just buying records of all the bands I really like and artists who've been putting out stuff that I like this year on those revenue shared days. So I think I know the next one is June 5th because I've got a couple of benefit compilations that all come out that day. It's going to be chaotic. But yeah, I bought a couple Caroline Rose records on one of the Bandcamp wave days. She did one of my favorite records this year. Lisa Prank. I'm trying to think. If there's any label that you really like and follow, you can generally go to their Bandcamp, click on the merch site, and it just lists everything that they sell physical copies of, or digital if that's what you prefer to buy. So I've just been going ham on the Bandcamp days, and because everyone's mail is sort of staggered, a couple times a week I get records in the mail, and that's a really nice boost. So check out Bandcamp on June 5th and July 3rd. Is that the first Friday of July? I don't know. I'm promoting Bandcamp with my speech here.
I've been listening and watching and reading a lot of different things. I am getting super deep on local artists to where I live in Iowa City and from around the area. And I always have them, but I just had a little bit more time to like put on the headphones and just dig into all the amazing work that's coming out from a lot of different folks in a lot of different genres in Iowa City. So that has been that's just been my joy, on top of all the other stuff that I'm just consuming on a daily or weekly basis.
Awesome.
Like who should I check out from Iowa City?
The one album to say right now is there's this new kind of new wave pop project called Gossip Cult, and I would just go to Gossip Cult's Bandcamp page and see if you can dig into that and just go from there. There's also a new record from Paul Carey, Cary, that's really good. There's an artist named Purchase. The S is with like a $sign. So check that out.
Oh, yeah. Excellent.
I could go on, so I'll stop there.
I love it. The craziest punk show I ever played was maybe multiple craziest punk shows I ever played at a single house in Iowa City. So I certainly believe there's some cool local stuff going on.
There is.
It's awesome. Yeah, I had a lot. I have other questions, but I'm gonna pass it off to Molly. We're gonna try and wrap it up, and we'll be in touch again soon.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. And some of these questions will be for Phil too, with the Q&A. So for those of you that have been listening, you can still put questions in the Q&A now. I know you were asking them, but I also want to say the new Perfume Genius album is incredible. I walked around my neighborhood, mask on, and just listened to it from start to finish, and it was very therapeutic. So if you're into Perfume Genius, or if you're not, you should be. That was a great day for me. Before we get into the Q&A though, I did just want to say, like, I feel like it would be remiss if we didn't talk about why we had to reschedule this event. And trying to think of how to frame this question has been difficult. So for those of you that tuned into our first event, you saw how we had a racist Zoom bomber come in to our meeting, and I do apologize for the people who were on that event for experiencing that. And I know, you know, all of us on the call now, we talked about it all weekend, and it really like weighed heavy, I think, on all of us for a while. But it really like calls into question, like, you know, on this event or for this conversation, we've been talking about how artists have had to become a little bit more creative in how they're putting their art out there. But what we're seeing is a lot of these online platforms aren't accessible to everybody. And yeah, going into that event, I had seen that there had been some like racist Zoom bombers, but just naively, I thought that it wouldn't happen to us. So I do apologize. But yeah, it seems to, that's the only, those are the events that are being attacked. So yeah, like I said, I'm not sure if I necessarily have a question for this. I don't know if we want to kind of talk about what that means for artists that might be hesitant to do some of these types of events, or how people who aren't like people of color, or, you know, white people who aren't being attacked on Zoom events, how they can better advocate and support artists that aren't, yeah, just that these spaces aren't conducive to events that they want to do. Yeah, I'm gonna let you guys talk now, because like I said, I've been trying to form a question around this, but yeah, I just want to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps naive on my end too, that, you know, I look at how many people are in this event and it's like 30 people, and we probably know all of them to some degree. So you don't expect not only the like horrifying racism that was part of our first event, but I think even before that started, I was DMing you, like someone sending me like really gross graphic sexual stuff. I brought this whole event up in therapy, because I think sometimes when stuff like that happens, my reaction is not only like, this is horrible and upsetting, but also like a sadness that you know, someone's life could be so bad that they feel the need to not crash an event that's like supposed to be a positive, enlivening conversation about the arts with just vitriol and bigotry. So I have to work on not feeling bad for people who feel the need to express themselves in this way. But I think, you know, some of our conversations about advocacy in the arts kind of extend to figuring out some of this digital frontier stuff as well. And the reason that I even knew about the Zoom bombing stuff is because Fight for the Future, who's been sort of connected with not only No Music for ICE, but Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, have been petitioning people to call representatives about cybersecurity issues at this time as well. And Zoom has been a big focus there. So I think, you know, where am I going with this? I think, you know, that's another part of advocacy that we need to be looking at right now, especially, you know, as a white person, it's something that I need to be doing, paying closer attention to how to prevent issues like this in the spaces that we're opening our fans up to.
I'll brief, like, couple thoughts that ran across my head. One is, for me, a lot of this kind of combating racial bias or subconscious bias is, it takes a lot of practice, and for me, like, even I have those tendencies, and so it also plays into the idea that you need opportunities to practice in some sense. So what I worry about maybe is that, and this is not a new thing, and it really comes with kind of this digital age, but the idea that, like, you know, when you're face to face and interacting with people on a personal, physical level, that kind of experience is way different than just hiding behind the screen, right? So for me, like, if you don't interact with an Asian person your entire life. Your conception of that race or that person or whatever is completely biased because you have no opportunity to really engage with someone on a real level. And I think it's interesting as we move forward, like there's going to be maybe less opportunities for people of different walks of life, different cultures, different races to really interact with each other. And I don't know how to combat that. But that's one thing that came to my mind with just this whole digital world and how to think about the future. And then the other part was that when it happened, it was super surprising, but then kind of in the aftermath, it was obviously not that surprising. And we've heard these things happen. And I guess every time something like this happens, it's more for me a surprise that I think it's surprising, right? Like that I think that I expected something different, right? So it's a weird experience. I was thinking to myself, like, that could have happened. Someone could have got on and made something about I was kind of more anxious. There's definitely more anxiety about being Asian nowadays because of the whole China coronavirus all that stuff. So I was kind of I have very not super strong, but very subtle anxiety about being Asian right now. And that is another, a whole other topic. So that's what I'll say about that. Yeah.
I obviously don't want to be in or experience or witness situations of racism or be the target of, or sexism or xenophobic behavior or anything that's just like marginalizing someone and just like some sort of emotional violence. Obviously don't want that at any time. At the same time, I'm not happy in any way that the last event we tried to do got bum rushed, but I'm like kind of happy that I was involved in it. And it's not that I'm invincible and not that I don't feel sad and get like hurt, but I'm just like, I'm like living in this and like, like I'm just like literally almost not surprised anymore, which is also like a bad thing. But I'm just like, no, let's get it out. Let's get it all out. Like let's embrace and confront how complex and dirty and beautiful and wondrous this culture that we live in is, and let's not shy away. Like, let's never paint over it. Let's never have a bullshit vision. Let's accept the messy, jacked up version of what America is, because I think that work is actually part of the work to getting to like the better thing or like the better side, And so it's like, yeah, like a pandemic happens and like the fight is still on for like our very national soul. like that has not changed. And now we have to like fight to like stay alive and fight for like people to like economically stay alive. And we still have to fight for our soul. So I hope that when events like this happen, that more people get energized to be on the fight of like bringing us together and acknowledging what we are.
Yeah, well, yeah. Thank you. And especially thank you, Andre, because, after all this happened, talking to you immediately after, just like the leadership that you kind of showed in it, like kind of helped. I was freaking out. So I really appreciate kind of you taking the lead on that too. Yeah. And like you said, sometimes people need to have that shock to admit that this is kind of our reality. And, even after it happened, people were commenting and saying like, well, what happened or what exactly happened? And it's like, I don't think why do I need to tell you exactly what happened for you to believe that somebody could come on an event and be racist? So we didn't entertain that. But I do want to also say, like, thank you. And I noticed some of the attendees too. I recognize some of your names because you reached out to us as a press individually or personally. and just saying that, you know, you were shocked by what happened and you were sending like love and courage to Andre and Phil and Sadie. And so, and people from all over too, the US and one woman wrote from Spain. And so I just, yeah, moving on to the Q&A, I do want to end on that like positive note that through this too, a lot of people have reached out and been very supportive. So thank you to people who have spoken up during this. Yeah, we have just a few Q&A questions.
You do before we move on, because I feel like you worked really, really hard to figure out a way to make this event safe, not only for us, but for the people attending for next time. So thank you for all the hard work and research you put into making sure we could have this conversation with each other, because I was really looking forward to, you know, two of us know each other already. Andre, we haven't met in real life. I hope someday. Games is a venue still. But yeah, I was so psyched for this, and I really, really want to thank you for working so hard to make sure it could happen in the way that felt good and safe.
Yeah, well, of course. And I mean, hindsight's 2020, I wish that I would have been able to do that before, but, and you know, the webinar is a little bit less intimate than the meetings are, because with the meetings, I like pictured it as like, we're all hanging out at someone's house, like with the audience members, and it was going to be really intimate, but you know, just doesn't work that way sometimes. So, but yeah, I appreciate all of you like working with us through this. Yeah, we do. Yeah, sorry, we are like running over an hour. Like I said, if we have more questions, you guys can still put them in the Q&A. A couple people have just said like, yay, unionizing. So we do have a question about unionizing. One specifically for, it's for Phil, but I think Sadie and Andre, you can weigh in on this as well. From Mackenzie, she's a Cleveland artist, and she says, do you have any insight for artists interested in building an artist union? How can the creative workforce organize itself in order to get the recognition it deserves? So any tips on you?
Okay, that is a tough question. You know, I don't have much insight on that. I think Sadie and might have more for sure, because the world I operate in is more, I don't know, that gets into some more issues of kind of.
Phil, you muted yourself by accident. Come back.
Hey, sorry. I was muted, and that's pretty much, I didn't have much to say about it. I'm sorry. I don't have much advice on the union front. I know that it's kind of case by case and localized and really depends on the profession. So it's hard in terms of the arts, again, because there are so many different types of arts workers, right? There's the whole challenge right now in terms of my world is that the arts is such an ambiguous, or not ambiguous, it's more of a, you know, a large multitude of professions and groups, and, you know, you could include graphic designers in the arts world, you can include engineers who are planning spaces. So it's hard to talk about, for me, in terms of unionizing, because it's more directed in terms of that labor professional aspect of it. So I don't know, musicians though, that's something that's maybe more specified and contained, that might be easier. So I don't have as much insight, so I'll pass that off to Sadie. That's cool.
Frankly, I don't have a ton more insight than you do, and I think that's actually part of why my answer might be helpful. When we started No Music for Ice, which is not a union, but it is, you know, a collective action, it started because I sent an email to some friends who had more organizing background than I do, saying, I don't know what I'm doing with organizing, but Amazon is awful. I don't support ICE. I don't support any of Amazon's labor atrocities. Is there anything we can do to get musicians to not just separately spout off onto Twitter, fuck Amazon, but actually pull our music down, or pledge not to do further, you know, exclusive songs or events for Amazon while they're still in service of human rights atrocities. So, you know, one of the questions that Phil had that we didn't get to was like, how are you working with your bandmate at this time? I'm really bad at working with other people. Like, I'm so from DIY world that if I have something I need to work on, I just kind of start working on it myself, even if I don't know what I'm doing. And something that's been really valuable for me to learn to do through No Music for Ice, and also being involved in UMA, which is brand new, is recognizing like I don't know how to start a union, but there are certain specialized things I know how to do. And if there are enough of us who are interested in the same goal, we can take all our little specialized things that we know how to do and not only further the agendas of our little group, but the groups that are working in tandem, like the cartoonists who are also against Amazon, or the existing musicians unions that have excluded club musicians historically that we're not eligible to join, but we still want the same protections for workers. So I think somewhere to start is looking at if there are existing unions or collective groups that have similar goals to the reasons that, you know, Mackenzie, I don't know what, sorry, I can't read, I need my glasses. I don't know what arts background you're from, but there may be a group that already exists, and reaching out to a group that exists in another location and seeing how they got started. I think people are really looking to support one another at this time. So building coalition is really paramount. And yeah, as someone who has no union organizing background, just knowing that there are little small things I know how to do to help, and seeing where those can be helpful in support of a larger goal is really been my experience, and probably a lot of ours, I imagine. Yeah, sorry, I really can't read. Why am I not wearing my glasses?
It's okay. Andre, I don't know if you had any like community organizing or union advice as well, if you wanted to join.
I think Sadie hit it with finding organizers who work in other realms. They know how to do this work in terms of bringing people together and actually getting action, getting action actually executed behind a cause. Outside of like official union organizing, I do think in whatever community you're in this case, Cleveland, just even finding unity, it doesn't have to be official, among the artist groups there, and then being able to communicate with the folks who support art, whether it's venues or galleries or other sorts of curators. Just even speaking as a group to those people will probably get their attention and create more of a conversation than you reaching out on your own to speak to them. And so like, I think at the most ground level, it's just like getting people together, understanding what your shared goals are, and then speaking to the folks you need to communicate with.
Yeah. She says, awesome answers. Thank you.
It was an awesome question. Thank you for positing it.
Yeah. And that's, kind of going back to, you guys kind of talked about this earlier too, about like at this time, we're kind of forced to start looking at people that work in different disciplines and how we can work together towards this common goal. So that's a really good point about reaching out to more people. Another person just said, hopefully people like this time is like showing people the importance of unions with workers putting their lives on the line, and that maybe it'll be like a revitalization. We just have one more question that was a text to me, sorry. It's what's one thing about pre-lockdown art/music, or about the pre-lockdown art/music world that you hope stays in the past?
Punishers. I don't know. I'm missing like horrible stuff that I didn't even like. Like I tweeted about this, which I hope doesn't cheapen me repeating it, but I'm missing like when I tell a barista my name with my order and then they say the wrong name back to me and I'm just like, yep. One of my friends replied to me like, I miss getting misgendered in public. Like, I think we're all missing even the really horrible human interaction, because it's just, you know, sometimes human interaction is horrible. I think, you know, some of the stuff with the union I'm talking about that we hope can stay in the past is artists signing horrible deals because they don't know better and there isn't public information about what a good deal should look like. I think, you know, transparency in what we all do in our work is really paramount right now going forward. But Phil is leaving. Don't leave me. I don't know what to say without your support here. Yeah, I mean, things like that I won't miss, but I do miss yeah, I miss horrible stuff too. It's so bizarre. And I think every feeling is valid, and even missing the horrible things in the outside. Like I miss the rain. What is that? But I do hope that we can use this time to recalibrate and maybe reconfigure some of the less savory aspects of the music industry. Lord knows there are many of them. Yeah, that's all I've got. Now that Phil's gone, I'm muting myself in protest.
I think from like the arts organization or venue perspective, I would love to like slow down a little bit. You know, I'm working on like so many shows and events like all the time, and the artists are like, let's get it done. The agents are like, let's get it done. And it's just like this nonstop thing, which is like exciting sometimes, but I wish we would just like slow down and have better conversations between artists, musicians, writers, venue organizers, you know, like arts organization people, managers, like agents, and just, I know there's like this money in the background that's like driving at least part of the industry. And I'm just like, all of this that we're doing, I think even down to like the agent, is all because you believe like art can like shift communities in a positive way. And it's like, I know sometimes we got to hustle and get the tour booked or whatever it is, or get like the last writer on the festival or the last publisher. But just like, let's just remember why we're doing this, and like, let's do it right. You know, so maybe it means being slower and doing less. Maybe everyone makes a little less money. I don't know, but I'm just trying to return to the mission. All right, that's enough out of me.
Sorry, I had to dip for a second. That's a very difficult question. I think for me, what I'm seeing is that, you know, when people are faced with difficult challenges, you kind of see their true colors maybe. And for me, I'm just kind of trying to slow down, like Andre said, and kind of pay attention to how people are digesting, reacting. I guess for me, I'm just kind of in a moment of getting as much feedback and learning as possible in how people are reacting to the crisis and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So it's a difficult question to answer right now, but I think the important thing is to keep that question in mind as we move towards the future and kind of pay attention to what is working and what doesn't work, and some of the obvious things that should go away, like, you know, misogyny, racism, those obvious things, and how are people responding to that in this moment of crisis. And I think Andre's response and $2 response to that racist Zoom bomber is a great example of like how to kind of do the right thing or think about it in the right way. So I'm just kind of picking up and learning from the things I see that are happening.
Okay, if I don't know if we have any more questions, since I'm saying we're at an hour, not to discourage people. I'm just letting anyone know that if they had a question but they were waiting, now is the time. But yeah, I like what you all were saying too, just about being more intentional and how, yeah, because I mean, I'm the publicist for $2 Radio. So yeah, I'm like supposed to be booking the tours and stuff. And when all this happened, I was like, so what is my job going to look like now? You know, I mean, obviously I still have a job, but yeah, but I've been thankful because it hasn't felt like lonely or difficult because of like the intentional relationships we've built, like with our authors and with bookstores too. And then you can kind of see that show with the bookstores where a lot of them are still doing okay. I mean, they still definitely need our help, but they're doing okay because they are like pillars of their community and they are like intentional spaces that people enjoy. So to plug them again, Prairie Lights in Iowa City, if you all could support them, and People's Books and Culture in Philadelphia. We don't really have any other questions. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add before kind of sign us off? No?
No, I'm just really happy we were able to reschedule this and make it work, because, you know, as Andre was saying, like, it's really nice to have people from different sectors of the arts come together and have conversations about what's wrong and how we can do better. And it doesn't happen enough in outside world life. So thanks for organizing this.
Yeah, well, I thank the three of you for being on here, and thank you everyone for watching, and hopefully you can take something away from this. And yeah, a lot of this too, because I originally just came to Andre because I was thinking about how Mission Creek was being postponed and how he is the director of the Englert Theater, and just wondering how he's navigating that. And he was the one who kind of came back and was like, well, what if we like invite people from different disciplines? So thank you,
Yeah.
Andre, for like exploding this event into what I think is like a very I don't know, it was just like great to hear from all of you and how you're doing, and hopefully the people that were watching can walk away from this feeling like a little bit more confident in how they can navigate this time with artists in their communities. So thank you all for watching. Again, we are going to keep doing these virtual events, so if you would follow us on social media, we have $2 radio stuff on our website. We are taking a bit of a break. Our next event isn't until June 1st, and that's between Eric Obanoff, who is our founder and editor, and Ken Bauman, who is the founder of Seder Press. We recently acquired Seder Press, and Ken ran Seder Press from 2009 to 2019 with a goal of publishing innovative literature. We're very excited to carry their titles. And so, yeah, so June 1st, there'll be a conversation between Ken and Eric about Seder Press and how $2 Radio is going to continue their legacy, not only by continuing to publish their books, but also we launched the Seder New Works Award. So for those of you who are writers, sorry, just really quickly, because we're excited about this award, and the deadline to submit for the award is September 1st. The Seder New Works Award will be awarded to a debut book-length work of fiction or nonfiction by an author who identifies as trans or non-binary. So the selected work will be published by $2 Radio in either 2021 or 2022, and you'll receive a $2,500 advance. So that's all made possible by Seder. We're very excited for that. And so if you know people who are writers and who would fit that, please encourage them, because we need more works by trans and non-binary writers. So yeah, in the world. Okay, sorry, last plug. Again, thank you guys for taking time out of your night. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Yeah, bye.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.